Oh, wait, I remembered it.
Mhm.
Sorry. It's my family went out to these petroglyphs. I forget where that was, but that was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. It was right out in the middle of a very flat expanse, and we walked through them, and you could see all the symbols carved into the rock. And then we heard coyotes singing across the valley. It was just pure magic.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're
I,
lucky that you get to see that sort of thing all the time.
I wonder if you were in Albuquerque. You might have been in Albuquerque for the petroglyphs. That's way on the west side.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'd have to ask my dad, but I remember that with perfect clarity. It was just so transcendent and beautiful. All right. Well, sorry, I interrupted you just as you were starting.
You're fine. It's nice to hear other people's experiences with the little gems that are in our states.
Oh, truly. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and begin the introduction. So welcome everyone to the 2021 NHCC Children's Bilingual Book Festival. We're so glad you're here. My name is Sutherland Jaramillo, and I'm an AmeriCorps member in the History and Literary Arts program at the National Hispanic Cultural Center. This event comes to you from the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico, home of the National Hispanic Cultural Center. We acknowledge that New Mexico is comprised of the ancestral and unceded land of 19 sovereign Pueblo nations, as well as 3 Apache tribes and the Navajo Nation. We are indebted to the original caretakers of this land and to the land itself. We are dedicated to engagement with complex issues of history, identity, heritage, and culture. This kind of engagement is at the heart of cultural understanding and promotes a legacy that is dedicated to justice and reconciliation. We'd like to thank the City of Albuquerque, Nisenda Credit Union, and Artful Life for their generous support for the festival. During the presentation, we will mute participants and close the chat until the Q&A time. So now I'd like to introduce Stephen Haff, who is your presenter for this session. So Stephen Haff, author of Kid Quixotes, is the founder and chief of Still Waters in a Storm. He has taught English, Latin, mathematics, and theater for 20 years at high schools, middle schools, and colleges in New York City, Vermont, and Canada. At Bushwick High School in Brooklyn, he co-founded Real People Theater with his students. The company received great acclaim in the worlds of education and theater and toured North America and Europe. The Village Voice called RPT nothing less than a revolution. Stephen has spoken at a number of pedagogical conferences and designed curriculum for the City University of New York, Gear Up program, youth communication, and the Center for Social and Emotional Education. He used to make his living writing for the Village Voice, American Theater, Bomb, and other publications, and earned his master's in theater studies at Yale University. So welcome, Stephen. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor. So because I'd like to make as much room as possible for a conversation afterwards, I'm going to set up one passage from my book. I'm going to give you some context, and then I'll read the passage, and then we can go right to whatever you want to talk about. So this is the book. It's called Kid Quixotes, and actually, it's being it was released last year, 2020, in April, right in the heart of the first big wave of the pandemic. So it came out at a time when people were, to say the least, severely distracted. And so the book is being reissued this summer in August, and they're actually putting a new title on it. They're calling it Still Waters in a Storm, which is the name of my school. They're changing the title, and I have mixed feelings about it because I love the title Kid Quixotes. But the thinking is that that title, while it resonates deeply and widely in the Spanish reading community, for Anglophones, they might recognize the name Quixote. They certainly do, but that it doesn't resonate with the same depth. So they're thinking that calling it Still Waters in a Storm would appeal to people as we start to try to come out of the pandemic, as an idea that brings offers peace to people, and they might be attracted to that. Anyway, I'm just mentioning that because you could come across this book with two different titles if you're interested in following up. So the passage I'm going to read takes place in this one-room schoolhouse in Brooklyn. The neighborhood is called Bushwick. And before I started this program, I was a teacher at Bushwick High School for a lot of years. And in the years I was there, the overwhelming majority of the students were from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. And it was just beginning, the influx of Mexican immigrants was just beginning at that time in the late 90s, early 2000s. But then by the time my program had been running for a few years, Mexicans and Ecuadorians had really taken over the majority of the neighborhood. So those are the populations that I've been working with for a lot of years. And in this one-room schoolhouse, it's a storefront right there on the street in Bushwick. We have all ages together. We have kids as young as 5 years old in the same class with 18-year-olds, and also college students and adult professionals. So it's all the ages together, and it truly is the village raising the child. I mean, it's a situation where the little ones bring out the best in the big ones. You know, they inspire them to care for the little ones, and to be an example, a wholesome example for them. So everyone's caring for everybody else, and that's the nature of the gathering. And it's like, what I want to say, like a Stone Age tribe. You know, our brains have only have been the same ever since the Stone Age, when we lived in these extended families and villages. And so that's what we're recreating here, and it's remarkable the extent to which people are at peace in this situation. And we can talk more about that later, about the contrast between teaching at the high school and teaching in this situation, which are really night and day. All right, so the scene is happening in the fall of 2016, and it's just after the presidential election. And we are at Still Waters in a Storm, my one-room school in Bushwick. And we've got four long tables pushed together in the middle of the room to form one big table. And a group of kids, ages 5 to 18, are seated all around the table, facing each other. And the only rule in this group, we only have one rule, and that is everyone listens to everyone. So that's the practice. It's a practice of mutual listening, reciprocal attention. And the ritual is that everybody writes, then they read out loud what they've written, and everyone listens to them. And then the conversation that follows consists of questions or things that we heard that we felt very strongly about, and we want to talk about those feelings that came up. So it's derived from the power of psychotherapy, talk therapy, and also the certain practices like the Quaker practice of their meetings where anyone can speak. There is no one person who dominates the conversation. So that's the situation, and we're working on our Kid Quixote project, which is continuing today, 5 years later after it started. We're still working on it. And the project was collectively translating and adapting the novel Don Quixote de la Mancha as a series of brief bilingual musical adventures that we keep adding to. Every year we add more adventures to the show, and it grows and grows and grows. More songs, more dialogue. And so the kids are reimagining this story of a delusional old man seeking adventures in Spain 400 years ago as the stories of these children, the stories of their own lives in this neighborhood right now. So it really is a vessel. The novel is a vessel that offers a structure that the kids then inhabit with their own stories and their own words. And when this scene begins, the kids have been writing about voyages, because the novel Quixote is, of course, a road trip. They travel down the road and have adventures. So we've been writing about voyages. And one girl, Sarah, who at this point is 7 years old, now she's 12 years old, but she was 7 back then. She's the one who will eventually play the part of Kid Quixote. She's the one who's obsessed with the novel. And like the hero of the novel, she reads day and night, night and day, never stops. Oh, Sarah's here. Hey, Sarah came. Hi, Sarah. I'm glad you're here. I'm just introducing the scene that I'm going to read all about you. All right. And then after that, we can, we'll hear you read, I guess. We'll figure that out. Okay. So just saying that you, Sarah, are 12 years old, and the scene that I'm going to read, you were 7 years old. And that Sarah at that time when she was 7 was shy. And for a while, she would never read her work out loud. And so this is the scene of a breakthrough for Sarah. All right. I don't think you've ever heard me read this part to you, Sarah, have you? Maybe you've read it if you read the book. Right, this is the time you tell the story about your mom crossing the border. All right, so here, let me see, I'll move this paper. Okay, here we go. The only child not to read is Sarah. For the first 2 months of the Traveling Adventures project, she has been quiet during class. When asked to read her writing to the group, she has shaken her head no. Sarah has been coming to the Stillwaters writing class on Saturdays since the spring, but she has yet to read aloud her own work, always asking a volunteer or another kid to read for her and to protect her privacy by not revealing her name. The Quixote group is about half the size of the big writing class, and there's nowhere for her to hide anymore, so she simply refuses. Then one day, in private, during a break, Sarah informs me that at her school, they're kind of rough on people. This is a quote. They're kind of rough on people. Everything you say is only right or wrong. She tells me that she sits at her desk in class, never moves, and never says anything. The school sent a social worker to inspect the house and interview her parents. The social worker asked if there is violence at home, but there isn't any. Sarah is just hiding, holding her mother's leg when faced with a stranger, or hanging on to her desk in school. At school, she doesn't know what is coming next. Play is not allowed in class. A vague threat of punishment for being wrong fills the air like humidity, and in her innocence, she is afraid. How do I help Sarah to be brave? I don't want to force her to read to the group. That could inflict trauma. I remember a story my paternal grandfather, Papa, once told me, a story that guides my teaching and illuminates this problem. At age 10, in 1917, he had won a bamboo fishing pole in a small town raffle, way up in the mountains of northern Idaho. His father told him he would need to wrap the pole in thread an intricate procedure requiring great patience. His father said that he himself needed to rewrap his own pole, too. So they sat side by side on the porch and wound thread around their bamboo poles. My grandfather added at the end of the story that looking back, he suspected that his father didn't really need to rewrap his own pole. Today, remembering Papa's side-by-side education and my father's tendency, as long as I can remember, to read whatever book I happen to be reading so we can think side by side, I sit next to Sarah as we write. And when it's my turn, I read to the group, showing her the way by making myself vulnerable. There was a time, I say, looking down at my paper, when I thought nobody loved me. I called the city's phone number for depression. A woman answered and said her name was Sarah. Our little Sarah at Stillwater's looks up, and there is that face again, eyes and mouth wide open at the coincidence of names. She asked, I read on then. She asked how she could help me, and I began to cry. This is the hotline for depression. I began to cry. My mother had raised me to cry, telling me that whenever I needed to, I could let the tears fall and keep going until whatever was stopping me was washed away. And I couldn't stop crying for a long, long time. I cried so hard I choked and coughed, and boogers came out of my nose. The word boogers makes the kids laugh. But Sarah did not hang up the phone. I kept repeating, nobody loves me. 2 hours of conversation later, after telling that grown-up Sarah that I had not left my apartment for days, eating only boiled eggs and saltine crackers and food left outside my door by friends I would not allow to enter, I agreed to go to the hospital. At the hospital, the psychiatrist, Heather, after listening to me for a long time, I don't tell the kids about the bandage on my wrist, told me she would rather have 2 broken legs than have what I had inside me. She promised me that I would feel better, but I would need to work very hard for a long time with the help of a therapist to understand my story. And she was right. The more I told my story, the better I understood myself, and the more peaceful I felt in my heart. I want the kids, especially the reticent Sarah sitting beside me, to know that here in this room, in our sanctuary, it is safe to be vulnerable, which comes from the Latin for able to be wounded. Because here, nobody will wound you. Here, you can breathe. No one will drop from the sky and carry you away. After weeks of refusing and listening and watching with those bottomless black eyes as other children and grown-ups read their stories, on this one day, this day of vulnerability, Sarah, daring beyond daring, raises her hand, is called on, and begins to read. She says, "My mommy rode across the desert on the back of a tiger." That's how she came here from Mexico. At first, nobody speaks. Then they can't stop asking questions. These questions are born not from doubt, but a love of adventure. Really? Yes, really, she told me in Spanish at bedtime. How long did it take them to get across the desert? 2 weeks. How did they cross the border? They came to a very high wall. It went as far away as they could see, to the left and to the right. The tiger said, "I can't jump over the wall. You need to carry on alone now." My mommy said, "I know you can do it. You have very strong legs." My mommy held on to the fur of the tiger's neck. The tiger moved its head up and down and crouched and wiggled its butt. The kids all laugh. Every time they hear the word butt, or with two T's, or butt with one T, they need to laugh. Then it jumped over the wall. My mommy almost touched the moon. The tiger said, "I did it." My mommy said, "Yes, you did it for sure." And then I say, "My cat moves her head up and down before she jumps up onto the refrigerator." "Wow," says Sarah, "that's high up." The kids have more questions. The room is jumping. How did they eat? The tiger knew where to find water and rabbits and cactus fruit and how to step away from snakes that were hiding under the sand. How did they get to Brooklyn? They walked all the way to Brooklyn, through the desert and the forest and the fields and the ghost towns and the swamps. Sarah speaks faster and louder as she goes, releasing a horizontal avalanche of words. Nobody tried to stop them? No. When they reached the city, they stayed on dark streets with not a lot of people. The shadows protected them. Nobody saw the tiger? Yes, strangers noticed the tiger and they were afraid. So they called animal control. The tiger fought back, she says, rising up a little bit from her chair, with its mighty paws and long, sharp teeth. But there were too many animal control humans with nets and ropes and a dart that made the tiger sleep. My mommy said bye and she cried. Her tears made lines on her dusty face. Sarah is now speaking in tongues, possessed and transported by the visions she has inherited from her mother. My mommy was sad for the tiger and sad for herself. She missed Mexico out in the fields. She missed the dirt between her toes and the wide open heavens above, more full of stars than darkness. Here in Brooklyn, the buildings blocked most of the sky. The electric lights erased the stars, and her feet, still bare, were punished by the unforgiving concrete. The tiger cried too, quietly as it was falling asleep, and said goodbye. Animal control took the beast away in a cage inside a truck. There is an awestruck silence in the room. What language did the tiger speak? Asks Lily. Spanish. My mom didn't know English then. Time's up for today, I say. Thank you, Sarah. Good job, everyone. See you next time. As the kids walk out the door, they look stunned, as if they had just met God. And that's the passage. Now, thank you. Patricia Sutherland, would you like Sarah to read next and then open conversation for both of us? Does that sound good?
Yes, and I can introduce Sarah
Yeah.
very quickly if that's okay.
Sure.
Sarah, we're so glad to be here. So Sarah is a student, writer, and actor. In 2015, at the age of 6, she joined an after-school program called Still Waters in a Storm. Sarah has been a founding member of the Kid Quixotes since 2016 and plays the lead role in the traveling serialized adventures of Kid Quixote. She loves to tell imaginative and creative stories that will make you believe anything is possible. So welcome, Sarah. We're so happy to have you here.
Yay, Sarah. So, Sarah, have you picked a part of your book to read? Do you have a chapter you would like to read?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So, Sutherland, do you want her to go ahead and read?
Yes, and if you don't mind telling us the title of your book, that would be great.
The book title is Becoming Kid Quixote, A True Story of Belonging in America.
Yeah, can you show people the cover? It's a great cover. See, there she is. And maybe can you say, Sarah, what you're going to read about today, so people know kind of what the idea is?
Today I'll be reading chapter 18, The 10 Cousins, since for me right now, since of this huge pandemic, I just feel lonely and don't have anyone. And every time I read the chapter of the 10 Cousins, it made me feel that they're still here.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, I'm going to enjoy listening to you. You want to go? Are you ready for her to read? Okay, go, whenever you're ready, Sarah.
Chapter 18, 10 Cousins. How many cousins do you have? I have a lot. On my dad's side of the family, I have so many cousins I can't count them. And most of them are older than me. But on my mom's side, my cousins are all around my age and we were all friends. Well, we have other cousins in Mexico, but we don't really know them except for pictures sometimes. I already told you about my cousin Bernite and Paulo. They come to Stillwaters with Cleo and me. Bernita and Paulo also have two brothers, Aldo and Bruno, and we all have other little cousins named Lucas. The 10 of us are a very good team. Once we were at a party in the park, and we got separated from our parents. There were so many people, and one minute they were all right there, and the next we couldn't see them. So all the cousins held hands in a big chain, then split up into two groups, with some big cousins and some little cousins in the group. We still held hands within the group, and we walked around the park shouting until we found our parents and aunts and uncles. Then we were all reunited together. It's hard sometimes being one of the oldest cousins, just like it's being hard an older sister. Sometimes I feel like I'm a traffic lady and a vending machine rolling into one because I always help the little kids across the street and I cut up oranges for them to have for a snack when they're hungry. Cleo complained that I should learn to make her favorite lasagna, but I'm only 10. So she stuck with orange slices until my mom or my dad or one of our aunts make lasagna. I'm the oldest cousin on the school bus. Paulo, Brittany, and Diego are all older than me, but they all take different buses to middle school, which that means I'm the official cousin captain on our school bus. At the beginning of the year, my little cousins were acting wild, which was distracting for the driver, so Miss Lovett, one of the deans, appointed me bus captain. Now I sit with Lucas, our youngest cousin, to keep him out of trouble and keep an eye out for the other cousins while I'm at it. Cleo just sit whenever she wants with her friends, but I have a job to do, keeping an eye out for my cousins. When I watch my cousins at home, it can be extremely exhausting. Somehow, whenever I think the little cousins are busy doing something undangerous, they start roughhousing, and before you know it, I'm in trouble for letting them. Sometimes I join in on the fun though, like when we were all cousins pillow war. Once there was a thunder and lightning, and first we all tried to keep the little kids from getting scared. But the lightning was so electrical blue it looked like our whole apartment building would be sizzled. The thunder rumbled so hard I worried the building would fall. Then there was a boom. That was so loud I forgot that I was supposed to be doing and yelled, "Take cover!" The little kids didn't need telling twice. They grabbed their blankets and pillow and dove under the bed, under the chairs. Then I had an idea. Diego and Brittany and I helped turn the bedroom into a fort to protect everyone from the thunder and lightning. We used the pillows to pretend we were soldiers hiding in the trench and waiting out the enemy. I bought food and chips and we stayed in our fort for a long time until the storm ended. The day, one of my favorite memories, we all 10 of us get together and we had a great time even if we were stuck inside during a terrifying storm. And that's it.
That was great, Sarah. So, Sutherland, how do we do the next part?
Yeah, so we can open it up for questions. People can unmute themselves and we'll open up the chat. And if no one has any questions, I certainly do. But first, I'd love to open it up for anyone to unmute themselves to begin a conversation. So, anyone has any questions?
They could be for me or Sarah or both of us. Anything you're curious about.
I have a question, Sara. What was I'm Patricia, so hello. I met you a little bit yesterday. What was it like to write? To sit down and have to like write?
When writing the book, for me, I just felt like I had someone to talk to based on my life and adventures I had with other people and people I loved.
So it was like, it felt like talking to someone?
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody else like to ask me or Sarah anything?
I have a question for you, Sarah. Can you talk a little bit about writing? Like, do you start by just free writing and then you revise? Or how do you come up with your ideas? Or how did you go about writing this piece?
When writing it, my sister, she was also included. And basically, we would like tell like basics of what we remembered and what we used to remember. Tell our and also say about what our family did, what we did when we were younger, and the person would just like combine it together, do it in order of events that happened, and just meet my parents, people I told during the book, and we'll just explain more about them.
Great. And then did you just do a lot of revising, or did they come out pretty well the first time you wrote them?
Basically, the person who I was talking to, they would just come to me and say if everything was fine so far the book, and if it was in order, and if the names are correctly spelled, and what person of what name.
Great, thanks.
She got to work with an editor. So,
wow, that's pretty professional.
Yeah.
When you work with an editor, you get used to someone talking back to you, right? So usually when we write sort of one way, right? Our mind tells us, but with an editor, they get to point out things that lots of times I don't think about. Lots of times they'll tell me things that don't make sense. They make sense to me when I say them or put them down on the page, but then the editor will say, I don't understand what you mean by that. And I'll say, what do you mean? It's very clear to me. Did that happen to you, Sarah?
Yes. And sometimes I wouldn't really like explain myself thoroughly, and they would just like try to make me like stretch out the words on what I was describing, just specific little details.
And we do a lot of that when we're writing songs and dialogue for the play. Right, Sarah? How we write a song and then we go back over it and people say, I don't think it's done yet. We have to look at this part and that part.
Yes.
Until everybody's happy with what we have. So that's a big part of our writing process is rewriting, revising. Yeah. And the kids are remarkably devoted to that process. So it takes so much patience. So much patience. You think, oh, I wrote something, done. I can move on. But not when you want to achieve a certain result that you're happy with. You have to keep coming back to it. So Sarah is amazing at that, and so is the whole group at that discipline.
Listening, because listening is so important to you. That's such an important way to develop as a writer, I think, right? Is to have other people listen to you and then tell you stuff that helps, so it becomes a process that you make something together with each other's help.
Truly, yeah. And they ask you questions. That's so valuable to have someone ask you a question. So you could, like Sarah said, so that she can give more information or stretch out the words. So, yeah,
I love that, Sarah. Stretch out the words. I'm going to use that. That's very
Mhm.
cool.
It is cool. Very cool. Does anybody else have it doesn't even have to be a question. It could be a thought or a feeling that you had when you listened to these passages, or something you're curious about, life in Bushwick, or anything that occurs to you that you're curious about.
I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about what inspired you to start this program.
Oh, well, as you may have gathered from what I said in the passage I read out loud to the kids, I went through a prolonged and serious mental breakdown. And I didn't find out until later that it had to do with bipolar disorder. But I had been teaching at the local high school for 7 years, Bushwick High School, and which was a really rough place. And I enjoyed the work, but then I just burned out and broke down. And when I recovered, when I was in treatment and got the right treatment and recovered, I wanted to keep teaching. So I came back. I came back to Bushwick. But I wanted to do it in a way that was healthy for me as well as the kids. And the situation in a typical school is not so healthy for anyone. You have a class with maybe 25 or 30 kids, and one teacher has to somehow provide all the attention that children need. And there's no parent on earth who has 30 children at once to take care of. And I had 5 classes a day, 5 days a week. So it's 150 kids. And they can't possibly get what they need. A teacher is supposed to serve in loco parentis, in the place of the parent. It's just impossible. So schools tend to be really stressful places. And even if you just love the kids and you love what you're teaching, it's just impossible. So I decided to invite former students of mine to come to my apartment and write together and just listen to each other without all the pressure of school, no report cards, no grades, no tests, no homework. Just come and sit together in quiet and write and then listen to each other. Which was always the part I loved best anyway, was the conversations and listening to people's stories. So people came, and then they told their friends, and they brought their cousins. And some of my former students had children of their own by that time. So they brought their kids. And it just turned into this group that just had a will of its own. And so we moved to the local pizzeria. They let us use their party room upstairs. And then we outgrew that. And so we had to find a space in the neighborhood where we could welcome more and more people. And so we found this little storefront near the train station and moved in there. And then people would walk by, parents walk by and see all these kids in the room, seeming like they're having a good time and they're reading and writing. And so they asked about it, and I would just keep letting people in. And at one point, there were over 200 people on the waiting list because we just didn't have room. And it's all free, and it was all like I was describing. It's a peaceful, safe place for the kids and for me, where I don't have an assistant principal, checking in on me with his clipboard, looking at his list of things that I'm supposed to be doing. And I didn't have to enforce rules that I didn't believe in anymore. that cast me in the role of an enforcer for restriction on behavior that I thought was really inhumane. So anyway, that's how that came about. It just kept growing and growing. And then one day, one of my students, who was now, I think he was then about 25 years old at that point, and he'd already spent a lot of time in prison, and he just loved coming here. And he said, we need to name this group. So we'd just been meeting just because we wanted to get together and listen to each other. So, and then he came up with a whole list of names and possible names. And one of his was Smooth Water in a Storm, because he said that this place made him feel peaceful in the middle of his crazy, stormy life. And so I said, well, if you change smooth to still water, I think we got something, because of that old saying that still waters run deep. And the conversations we have there are deep and meaningful. So that's how it became what it is.
Thank you so much for that description. And I just want to put a little ad out there for those of you who are in our audience. You should check out their website. It's a really beautiful website.
Oh, I'll type that into the chat.
Thank you.
Type the address, yeah.
And I have a question for Sarah, and then I will extend it to you, Stephen.
Okay.
Sarah, so what do you enjoy about being part of Still Waters in a Storm? And if you could share one thing with kids like you, what would it be?
What I enjoy when being in Stillwater is where we all come together, no matter how old you are, how tall, how short, it doesn't really matter. But we all gather around, share our imagination, story, listen to each other, and share thoughts, feelings, emotions. And it just, for me, it feels like I'm at home and we're all a big family together.
You want me to add to that?
Yeah, and I think too, kind of one of the questions that I've been thinking about is, what is the impact on your students, your community, and yourself from meeting weekly over the course of these 5 years?
Well, I would say that I agree with Sarah, that the same things she said, that's what I love about it too. I love that we're all partners, partners in thought, partners in taking care of each other, practicing kindness and patience. I just love all of that. It just, it nourishes me truly. Yeah, that's, what was the second part of your question?
Just the what is the impact on your community and yourself from meeting over the course of these years?
Well, it's like a neighborhood within the neighborhood, kind of. Everybody lives within a few blocks of the classroom, and we all get to know each other really, really well, in a way that you can't do in a typical school setting, because you're not, generally speaking, from my experience, in a school situation, you're not really paying attention to each other. You're paying attention to the assignment or whatever it is that's in front of you. That they always used to call it, what was it my supervisors called it? Staying on task. That was the phrase. So that's what that's about in the usual situation, staying on task. And here, the subject is always the people in the room. And then, of course, finding a project, something like a puzzle or something that we're building together that we can all contribute to, that we all are an expert in some way, and we all can contribute to it. So this show that we've been building, in year 5 now, that represents our relationships, how well we know each other now and how much we care about each other. And we're able, even on Zoom, even though we can't meet in person, we're still writing songs. You know, we are carrying on despite the obstacles. And we can do that, I believe, because of how well we know each other. And that helps you to feel safe, right? You're in a place where people know you, they love you, and they're listening to you. So it's just this profound personal, what would you call that? Just like a deepening of us as people and our relationships, our loving relationships. So that's what it's all about.
Thank you. Thank you for
And the school actually have been doing it. It's now year 14 of Stillwaters. And I think I mentioned that Sarah was 6 when she came, and now she's 12. And we have teenagers who are on the verge of college, 17, 18 years old, who've been coming since they were 8 years old. So, you know, it really is, like Sarah said, a family. And that's what makes it hard to be separated because of the pandemic. But just like Sarah said, when she's remembering her cousins, and we're remembering each other and we're meeting on Zoom, we're able to, I think, to carry on despite the separation. So that's, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And we have a question in the chat. Do students graduate from the program, or can they stay indefinitely?
Oh, they can stay as long as they want. And they have. There's just last year, we had our first person who joined as a little kid and then went off to college. Leslie, she was a big part of our school and of this Quixote project. And she went off. She's in Bard College now. She's in her, what is she in, Sarah? Is she in her 3rd year or something? I can't remember. But she comes back every once in a while. So, you know, it's wonderful. And then kids from all over the neighborhood would stop by the classroom when, you know, they may not even have been there for a couple of years, but they just wanted to come say hello. And so the door is always open.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anyone can unmute themselves and ask. We still have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I have another question. Thank you so much, Stephen and Sarah. Can you tell us like a little bit about how it works? Because it sounds like you've got all different ages. So when people all come into the room, sort of what happens first, what happens next, and how do you finish?
Sarah, would you like to start? What happens on a typical Saturday?
On a Saturday, we just like gather around. Later, we just wait for people to come in for a couple of minutes, and then later Stephen, he will just order pizza on Saturdays. Then later we'll just we have time enough to eat it. But then later, when we like finish, like people coming in and stuff, we'll just gather around in a huge table. And then later we'll just write down our thoughts and continue the music. And when translating the book, my first thought that came out to my mind was for me, it thought it was impossible to complete the Quixote book, which is everything in Spanish, old Spanish, like it's just confusing. But then later, soon, we started using dictionaries, vocabulary words, and just understanding it little by little as soon as we got the hang of it. And then later we translated into scripts, dialogues, and just identify how the story is going.
Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds amazing. It sounds like really a group process after pizza's first.
Well, yeah, I mean, eating together is an important part of this. You know, I think it's always been an important part of any human gathering, which again makes it difficult, you know, when you're in a typical school situation, because there's a certain time when you have to go and eat your lunch. But I like to have it so that the kids can eat when they're hungry, so they and eat also as a group. It just brings you closer together to share food, and their parents bring in delicious food for us too. Parents, when we meet in person, they sign up. Each family takes a Saturday where they will provide the food, and we're extremely lucky for that. We get the best Mexican food, and it's just a wonderful feeling to know that people are being nourished in every way when they come there. I also want to notice something, add to what Sarah said. When the kids come in at first, they can do whatever they want. They can pull a book off the shelf, or they can play a game with their friends, or they can go out on the sidewalk and kick a soccer ball around, and just do whatever, talk with their, just hang out and be there in their space. So that, I think, Sarah, you can tell me if I'm right about this. I think that seeing their friends is a huge part of why they come to Stillwater's, because that's where they have friends who really know them, right? So, because when you're at school, you're in class, you don't talk to each other, and then at recess, there's not much time, right? Recess is really short, and people tend to run around screaming during recess. So they don't really have extended conversations that, about whatever they want to talk about. So they're able to do that. And that's why I also, when we're meeting in person, we meet for 4 hours. So that's about an hour to play and eat, and then work for an hour, take a break, play some more, work a little more, play, and go home. So, because that's just so important, and they don't get enough play.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else would like to ask or say anything?
We've got just a couple of minutes left. So again, anyone is, feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
I'll ask another one of Sara. This is just curious because I've spent my whole life, with the exception of a few years, in New England. What's it like living in New York? If you heard my cat, I'm sorry. He meowed just then.
Well, living in New York, so far in my 12-year experience, around the area, it's kind of quiet in Brooklyn. In the neighborhood, it's quiet. Basically, there's really no crimes happening. But if you go to the main part of New York, Union Square or Times Square, something like that, it's crowded, noisy, whole bunch of chaos going around everywhere. But at the same time, it's actually pretty cool to explore, since there's museums, libraries, huge libraries especially, and you could go to movie theaters, playgrounds, amusement parks, fairs, which is pretty fun in my experience.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to move my computer for a second because it's going to die.
Okay. Well, anybody else with a question or a thought or a feeling?
Well, if there's no other questions, then we'll conclude our time together and prepare for the next session. But thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us today and for reading to us. I so enjoyed getting to hear you read, and thank you, Stephen, for sharing just this project that the schoolhouse that you've created, and and the work that you do. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having us. And then Southern